But anyway, I have a home group, which is a freedom group in Sacramento. I have a sponsor, and I sponsor women, and I have service commitments, and I think we got that covered. Everyone can relax now. So I started drinking before what? I had the first drink when I was first time I got drunk, I was 8, but then I really started, when I was like 12 or 13, and I had an abnormal obsession with alcohol. I thought it was the solution. It was very magical to me. I loved the way that it felt, and I pursued that to the gates of insanity and near death. And doesn't have to be like that. I like how I heard here, the elevator's going down. Where do you want to step off? And I feel like if I would have done honest step work or step work, that I would have seen that this is progressive, that it's never going to get better. Like the literature says, we're like men who've lost their legs. We never grow new ones. And I need that kind of finality in my mind, because my mind will tell me this time it's going to be different and you don't have this. And, these days it just tells me I don't pick up the phone when a sponsee calls. But I'm trained and I pick up the phone because I know the truth is I actually feel amazing when I take counterintuitive, contrary action, as we say around here, do the opposite pretty much of what I want to do, the opposite of my defects. So my story is didn't need to be this dramatic. It was over here in Pleasant Hill somewhere where I was convinced that this time it was going to be different, that you guys were kind of square. You were also really screwed up, but you were also kind of square. That's what I thought. And that, someone said, how are these pool rules or pool suggestions, how are they going to fix this phenomenon of craving, this mental obsession with alcohol? And I hit bottom here for the second time up in these hills somewhere with lower companionship. And, it's bad when lower companionship says, all right, we're done. We're turning in. What? And I'm by myself because I have that obsession so bad that, I would search through anything and everything to try to get more alcohol. And, I love how it talks about this is not a moral issue, because I really wanted to be an okay person. I could never be good enough to be really a good person or student, and I couldn't be bad enough to be really, really bad. So I was like stuck in this, this hell of my own making, which was that I was president of Students Against Driving Drunk. But I found a loophole, many loopholes, and I didn't have self-esteem for that reason, right? When we get here, you get self-esteem by doing esteemable acts. And I knew nothing about that. I just wanted more of everything. I wanted more attention. It talks about that in the 12 and 12 quite a bit, is that I just want more of than a normal human, right size amount of goods, good things, instincts. So whether or not, I would say I do come by alcoholism, honestly, and I've heard so many people who have had wonderful childhoods and they're alcoholics. So that definitely does not make me an alcoholic. It made access and, lack of supervision and all that. Was, sort of semi-feral. And I thought for a long time that if I could convince the right people that I had really, really been harmed and hurt by my upbringing, that it would explain all of my bad and bizarre behavior. And here, I get to really grow up and take, radical responsibility for my side of the street, which, that is not my default. And, my sponsor and I have some really good laughs today about me trying to, I'll try to pitch her an inventory, let me tell you exactly what these people did to me in a different way so you'll listen and absolve me of any wrongdoing. And the thing is, even if I have 10%, that's my 10%. And then I'm the one who, needs to go to God and ask for those defects to be removed and then do the opposite, which is the hard part for me, is to, courage doesn't feel good. And growing up doesn't, feel so great. To do the right thing doesn't feel so great until I'm done with it. And then I'm like, yeah, that was amazing. So, yeah, when I got into high school, I was restless, irritable, and discontented. And I could go in my drinking, I think I could go 2, 3 weeks without drinking, but I feel like it was a monster in me. I still feel like I have a monster in me, and I must never forget I have a monster in me. And my skin would get tight, stark raving sober, my skin would get tight. And there's a story in the back of the book, which I haven't read. But I know a cool quote from it. That if I was enjoying it, I wasn't controlling it. And if I was controlling it, I wasn't enjoying it. And this just gave me God bumps, because that's just was so the thing was I knew I was going to lose control at some point. And I tried getting involved with all these activities, like I said, but it was really for self-serving purposes. It wasn't, how can I contribute? Like, I absolutely grew up in AA. I was never trying to figure out what I could bring to the party or how can I truly help a friend. It was all, just surface level. And, like I got arrested at a cheerleading event. And it talks about us being like the actor, right? I'm trying to run the whole show, and I also want to enjoy a reputation I don't deserve. But when I drank, all of that would go away, right? I would just feel like, everything that people work hard for is suddenly and magically mine. And then I want more and more and more. And so if you're new, I hope this makes sense that when we take alcohol into our body, sets off this, what they call an allergy, like an allergy, this phenomenon of craving, and that we have this mental obsession. My first sponsor, when I got here, had me write in my big book on step 2 is the only way I'll get drunk again is if I believe the lie that this time it's going to be different. And so I didn't understand that until she pointed out to me, because it says restore us to sanity. And I was clearly could have been considered insane when I got here. But that's and it talks even about the subtle insanity that precedes the first drink. I might be botching that, but it's lying. It always lies. It lies in my voice. And it lies about situations. And I know that, like, I kept thinking outside things were going to fix what was wrong with me inside. And I tried all these really bizarre solutions, and they're funny. And that's one thing, if you're new, I hope you know that, like, we laugh at really horrid stuff around here and inappropriate things. And when I hit bottom by myself, I hadn't talked to my best friend in 2 years, and I was living in absolute filth. I was living in squalor, biohazard type stuff. And, I thought, well, my problem is that I'm naturally blonde and the world isn't taking me seriously. So I'm going to get very long brunette hair extensions glued into my scalp. And the thing is with hair extensions is you have to comb your hair. And so before it was cool, I had these huge dreads that were just these enormous tangles. And I would comb my hair over and then just walk like this, so no one knew what was going on. And I had a gland that backed up right here, so my face was malformed right here. My hair was growing out blonde. We kept trying to dye it, so it was turning green. And then, every 3 days, I would try to comb my hair, and it started ripping out from different sprockets in my head. And so, I didn't have sheets on the bed because I would fall asleep with gum in my mouth, and then just continue to lay on the gum, like on Bart, where it's just not sticky anymore. It's just a huge DNA sample. And, I cut the top of that mattress off before I moved out of there after I got sober, and I threw the top away and then threw the mattress away. But, I wasn't taking showers regularly. I had an overflowing shower pan. And so my solution was not to deal with if you drink, suddenly everything's working correctly. But I would just take shorter and shorter showers. And I thought, my problem is I need to get a bird feeder. It's spring. I need to get a bird feeder and bring in bird energy. and, and that will solve what's wrong with me. And what I was doing was I didn't have a vacuum cleaner. I was stepping on the bird seed and stepping on the bath mat, which was wet, and it sprouted. So all of this to tell you, I was lonely. And my world was very small. I was working as a waitress in a comedy club, and there was a bar underneath it, and I would make money. I was not cute. People were not buying me drinks, so I had to get myself drunk. I had to go downstairs and get myself drunk. And in the most self-serving, self-centered way, which just dawned on me like 15 years ago, how self-centered this was one night I wasn't drunk enough to drive out Crow Canyon Road because, the one eye and getting closer to the wheel. I had the mental, obsession. I had enough alcohol in me to create that phenomenon of craving. And I was on a rampage, and it wasn't enough because the bar closed. The bartenders had bought a 6-pack or a 12-pack or something that was in the back of their truck, and it was 2:00. They kicked everyone out. I was so desperate to get drunk that I'm pretty sure I was drinking empties at the time we could smoke. I wouldn't have put it past me to drink empties with a cigarette in it, just that level of desperation. And, I have this memory seared into my spirit, so that if I ever forget that I have this thing, this to me is what the big book calls pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization, is that I went and knocked on the locked door to ask the bartenders if I could buy 2 of their beers. And I don't remember what they said, but I remember how they looked at me. As God bumps again, because it's a shame that only we know that look in other people's eyes, like, what is wrong with you? Like that is just in my consciousness forever. And I do think that that's a gift. I think it is important to feel shame about certain things, and I don't ever want to go back there. And that's why I do what I do today. And I could hope to continue with this level of willingness that I have to keep doing the deal. But my world just got smaller and smaller and smaller, and God orchestrated I think it was about 6 or 8 people to come into. I was working as a massage therapist, and I think it was 8 sober people that all, I don't know if they all knew each other or whatever, but God, central casting, called them in, and they'd be face down, but I felt like they could see right through me, and I was very compelled by their sobriety. And they did have, we talk about the light coming on in our eyes once we get sobriety. And there was something about them that was really compelling to me. And I kept asking questions, and then so they unfortunately invited me to a meeting. And I said, well, I'm not that bad. Sorry, you guys are lame. But I tried to go to another place, and I went to the other place, and it was complete chaos. So I tried to go to another place, and I accidentally walked into a really happy, joyful, God-filled, like I call it God fumes. There were God fumes in that meeting. It was a big AA meeting, and I could feel there was a power greater than me. And the meeting started on time. Everyone sat down. You guys didn't say, hey, let's check in with the weird girl. It just went on without me. And I could feel the steadiness of that. I could feel the sanity. And I could feel what I now know is the solution. But I just wasn't done yet. I had real fellowship sobriety for a long time. I wasn't 21 yet, and I thought that was the problem. Like if I just had a real ID, because my fake ID, my friend's hair was shaved on the opposite side. So I was so self-obsessed whenever I drank in a bar, I thought we figured out the hair thing. You're not supposed to be here. And so, I had all these reasons yet, and I didn't want to do any work. And I think that getting full knowledge of my condition, meaning trying to stay stopped, trying to see if you can have a few drinks and stop. It just recommends that in the book. Try these experiments out on yourself. But I was full of self and wanted more and more attention. Like I would get like I was hanging out at the coffee bar and just you were asking me to do homework and I don't do homework. You know what I'm saying? I steal answers, and God forbid the one time I ever do my work and you want answers. Oh, no way. So I thank God for, Danville Friday Night Young Peoples because, they just recently had a 40-year anniversary and it was such a beautiful, fun place to be. And I got hooked up with people who were being of service to Alcoholics Anonymous, and there was going to be a young people's conference in Chico, Akipa, and I signed up to I registered early because they registered early, and I sent that off. And from the time I sent it off, from the time the registration packet came back in the mail, I turned 21, and I got the mental obsession that this time it's going to be different. And I had no solution. I had no spiritual defense between me and the insane thought. I had no defense between me and that first drink. So, they say the first drink gets you drunk. Well, I went and bought something and it didn't. But I think maybe 3 weeks later, I really don't know how long the time was, but I'm going to say, let's just say it was 3 weeks. In my selfish, self-centered, this time it's going to be different thinking, I just said, I don't know if I'm going to go or not. I may not live or whatever. Like I was that, cavalier about this. And, thank God for sober friends who did reach out to me when they didn't see me. And, that was a lifeline to me. My friend Joby called and she, why don't you meet me? And, that was really painful to meet her, because I had to patch up, and try to appear normal in public. And she was like radiating the sunlight of the spirit, and that was really painful for me to be around because it's when someone's in the solution and you're not, it's not a good place to be. And she just said, I don't know if we're going to make it back, but just be careful because not everyone can make it back. And I just said, I can make it back whenever I want, And the night before the conference, I still didn't know if I was going to go, but I proceeded to just consume as much as possible here at this condo. And I got very, very ill. I turned green and, it's overly dramatic and I don't always talk about it, but I do feel I was pulled back from the brink of death that night. And I don't understand who makes it, who doesn't. There's been so many times I've wound up in the street by myself. I've gone with strangers. The stories. Ooh, I get chills again. But I woke up the next morning and looked like none of that had happened to me. But I just intuitively knew I had signed up to be of service in on the registration form, and I was supposed to read the traditions at the opening meeting. And service, I do think helps keep us sober because that was sort of this thing like, oh, they're expecting me. And I got there and I said, I have less than 24 hours. I got there right when the meeting started and they said, get up there and read that. And that was March 15th, 1992. And, I'd love to tell you that I followed a bunch of directions and I was humbled and I was grateful and, whatever. No, I was really, really arrogant. I went to the bookstore in town and I went and got the Skeptic's Guide to the 12 Steps. And I was staying in a room, unfortunately, with a couple of big book thumpers. But Lisa O and Joby said, essentially, why don't you just read the blank and big book? And that really hurt my feelings. I needed something very different and unique and special because don't you know who I am? And thank you. And so, I went, we used to have a bunch of acronyms on the table. And during the time that right after I was newly sober, I didn't work steps for, I feel like it was like 4 months. And we used to have an acronym that said nuts, not using the steps. And that's exactly what happened to me. I was so uncomfortable and I was causing all this, wreckage, these fellowships with these people and all my instincts and collision and all this stuff. And got so uncomfortable. Now I understand, and then I understood, oh, this is a way of life so that I don't get so uncomfortable around other people because of my, instincts and collision. That drinking sounds like a good idea. So I wound up getting a sponsor who was very serious about AA. She was, if you want to get sober, go see her. And she, gave me history lessons. She showed me where we take some directions, we meet conditions. There's all these like little kind of contracts in there, and we get promises every little step we do, not the 9-step promises, which are way out of context and are very confusing. They were confusing to me. You just don't tell me they're 9-step promises. I just think I should get them without doing anything. And I love that. I love getting stuff without doing anything. And but she was very serious about AA. And then she didn't show up to hear my 5th step. And that was the beginning of her not showing up for Alcoholics Anonymous. And I hate to tell you that these stories kind of go the same way. And hers ended pretty dramatically, where she lost she was sleeping out of her van after she started drinking again. And then she was sleeping under a car and they didn't know that she was there and they accidentally killed her. So I am so grateful to her for what she did, show me and made me promise to work with others like she had worked with me. And, in this way, I hope that I can keep doing that, So, fast forward to my sober life, it's been a lot of things. Unfortunately, there's been a lot of character building. And I will say, this whole time that I feel like I've been, for the most part, doing the best that I could. There was stuff that was running in the background that I didn't know, defects that I didn't know that I had, steps and ways of working the steps. The sponsor I have now, I've had for 22 years. And I'm so grateful that she's just a real amazing and really fun example of how this thing works, and gives back so much to AA in ways that she'll never know. And I don't want to do that much service. He's really, really busy. But I've really stepped up to the plate, and service that I thought was for grown-ups, and business meetings I don't want to attend, I became willing to attend, especially around COVID, where my home group kind of imploded, and that there were, because I had worked the traditions with her, I knew that what we were doing with funds was not in alignment with traditions, and how beautiful that AA allows us the right to be wrong. And that doesn't mean that I need to keep going to a place that's not in alignment as I see how the traditions work. And, we just have to sometimes, break up with home groups and sponsors and stuff like that. And it's a lot of growing pains. But I found, that God meets me everywhere. Like something will go off-road or I'll take it off-road, and I have to do the work spiritually and footwork in the real world. And then God delivers me to places where I could not think of for myself, and that I thought were going to be less than. I always think, to take the 3rd step, I always think, if I turn my will over to this higher power, that my life is going to be worse and boring, and it's going to be some kind of punishment. But my experiences show me it's the opposite. It's this joyful, expansive, freeing, calming, grounding, joyful experience. It's just my fear that God is not going to take care of me. And, I've had different higher powers over the years and realized that I had assigned character defects to my higher power that belong to us failed humans and not to a loving power that created me and wants the best for all of us. Yeah, I remember Dave C saying, his wife was going through cancer and he was so in love with his wife, and we were both of service. I was going through my second divorce and sobriety, and his wife was going through cancer. And he said, Lizzie, all these people around here are going through the same things. And he said, but I just know beyond a shadow of a doubt that my God absolutely adores me. And I just couldn't relate, to a God that would adore me because I had messed up. How would you be getting a second divorce? And I've grown in that relationship with my higher power. I put in the time to actually have a relationship where, I start my day off now with writing everything that I'm grateful for, and that the third and the seventh step prayer are a big part of my daily life. And I start the day off that way because it's insulation on the wiring for me. It feels very different. I was telling the sponsor, it feels like I haven't flossed my teeth if I don't do that. And I got to tell you, I've only been flossing my teeth for about 4 years on a regular basis. And my prayer and meditation practice haven't always been as consistent as they are now. And it's just taken me a lot of time to get all of the things, the suggestions, doing them all at the same time. And it's kind of, sometimes I'll be doing everything great here with service and then this falls off and then that, so it is about progress for me and not about some rigid program, but I do need structure, and there's certain things that I have my sponsees agree to that I have agreed to. And it's really not a big deal. It just feels like painful sometimes to my ego, which I want to control my time. Like someone said, oh, I got to get all my ducks in a row. And then I realized those aren't my ducks. Whose ducks are they? So how am I doing on time?
Almost 10.
10 minutes?
12 minutes.
12 minutes, okay. So I don't know what to say other than amends is my least favorite and most favorite step 9. I will say that I don't think I was doing 6 and 7 very thoroughly until I started working with the sponsor that I have now. I was told that where in the big book they write short, we work short. But based on their experience when they wrote the 12 and 12, there's a lot more about 6 and 7, calling, this separates the men from the boys and that it's a lifetime practice. And I don't like lifetime practices. But it has been the most rewarding thing for me to get the specific names of my defects so that I can see when they're coming and that I can hopefully not cause harm and need to take formal inventory and need to make amends. There's some amazing things that have happened around step 9 that were clearly higher power. One is that I had a family event and it was my anniversary, my AA anniversary, and no one in my family acknowledged it. So I was really, really hurt. And I was thinking of horrible things to do to show them how much they had hurt me and my humility. So I was really, really obsessed. It was before cell phones were working. And I was I was praying and nothing was working. And I went into this family member's garage and saw that they had unfolded laundry. And this is not me. This is the beauty of Alcoholics Anonymous and what you guys taught me. I folded their laundry and the resentment went away. A guy had fixed my car the first time I was sober, and I owed him $130, and I didn't know his last name. We're a little too anonymous with each other sometimes. And so he was on my amends list, and it was one of those, okay, he's on the list, I'm willing, and don't know how to find him. And I went to San Diego World Conference. There's like 60,000 people there. And I walk into the foyer and he's standing there and I have $140 in my pocket. So is it odd or is it God, you know? And in terms of, is God everything or is God nothing? What's our choice to be? My friend went to a rehab where they said, okay, for a week, why don't you guys just pretend there is no God? And then we're going to do 1 week where we just pretend there is a God. And I guess the first week, thank you, was so unbearable that everyone said, okay, tapping out. There's got to be a God. For me, self-will doesn't feel good. And I know that there's a process, the living amends for me with my family is to show up and also see how I can be of service and see where they have done things that are right versus everything that has blocked my view of them, and any of the good things that they have done. And yeah, that's been an ongoing thing. It's these kind of layers that come up. My home group has a thing we read before we hand to the speaker that for whatever reason, it says, please don't use any props. So I don't know what happened, but I feel like using a prop right now. But not really sure where to go other than I've been through a lot of things in sobriety, and I told my sponsor, God, what am I supposed to tell the newcomer with all, 2 divorces in sobriety, 2 marriages and divorces in sobriety, 2 failed businesses, and experienced a lot of unsettled, I showed up to my home group. I think I was 16 or 17 years sober, had to leave where I was living, was not a good environment, with my suitcase. And so what am I supposed to tell the newcomer? And she said that you know how to stay sober through all of it. So, now looking back, I just feel like God, for whatever reason, I don't, wouldn't like to think God's just doing things. I know that I have had to get right with myself through a lot of different experiments of relationships where I try to make things work and they don't work. And then I have to clean that up or whatever. And a lot of trying. My story is not one of cash and prizes. But through it, I really have developed this relationship with my higher power and other people. Where, as my friend Ed likes to say, now I feel like anytime I have one of these crises or, even a problem in business or whatever, I just feel like there's more God and less Ed. And, if anything, I can turn around and show someone else how to get through these things sober. And that's been a real blessing. Sponsoring is, it's sort of this having to get rid of people pleasing and tell people the truth. And I'm so grateful for the people who've told me the truth. My sponsor, she does adore me and we have a lot of laughs, but she's not trying to protect my feelings in order to save my life. And I need a sponsor like that I can't run games on. And it's a sort of a stringent way of living, and everyone gets to be sponsored how they want to be sponsored, and I stepped off my kind of sponsorship is the best sponsorship a long time ago. The steps to me are so mysterious and such a gift. They're so divinely inspired, just like our literature that, it's like these laws that are in place, and it doesn't, Penny P used to say they don't care what you think about them, they just work. They don't care if you want to do them, they just work. They don't care if you've done them before, they just work. And I found that spiritual truth is something that I can rest on. And again, if I made it sound all serious, it's serious, but again, it's also just a lot of fun, and it is a joy to feel what is in this room. And all of you make that possible by sitting in a seat here. You're showing, thank you, you're showing the newcomer that AA works. So you're being of service, and all the jobs and are needed. This whole thing is bizarre how it works, how it came to be. And my sponsor said, pick a piece of literature and read it together. Well, I try to be all squishy and not challenge myself, and I picked language of the heart because that sounded nice and fluffy. And it's about the formation of the traditions. And it's my comprehension and my reading are all over the place, but I find myself getting choked up because we touch on how God was working through the conflict the whole time, and the amount of suffering that our founders went through to get this thing here. And my childlike thinking is that if I'm just doing God's will, everything will be easy. And it's taken me a long time to not have a codependent relationship with a rescue God or a God that's going to, just bring things easily into my life, and that I have to work. So it's faith and works. And I've landed too heavy on faith, and I've landed too hard on self-propulsion with just works. And so now I just do my best to just put one foot in front of the other with my higher power. And I love the saying, we just hold on to our sponsor's hand and then hold on to our sponsee's hand. And that's how we walk through life. And it's a beautiful way to live. And thank you for allowing me to do service.
Yeah.